And a pleasant good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101. David Hines here, Tuesday evening, our first program for the week. And I would like to welcome all of you down to our program this evening. And if you're joining us, of course, where it's evening, welcome. And of course, if you're joining us where it's later in the night, good night to you. Those of you who are joining us from London, England, Europe, where it's well into the night, welcome to Politics 101. Of course, if you're joining us from Guyana, welcome, of course, to Politics 101. We continue to cover that story up, not letting go of that story because it is a very important story. Tonight, we expect a couple of friends to join us. Rickford Burke is already backstage and ready to go. And no stranger to you, and Adam Harris has promised to stop by later on. So please share the link and welcome to you. I hope the weekend has been a productive weekend, meaning that if it's weekend away from your work, that you spend that weekend doing some political work, because political work is important, whether it's calling up people, whether it's looking at some previous shows. If you're in Guyana, whether you went into the communities, political work is important. Remember what this whole business at Mocha teaches us is that we can't expect anything better from this government. We can't expect any modicum of humanity from them. It's government aggression, political aggression, economic aggression, open violence, raising people homes. And so we've got to put our shoulders to the wheel and begin to organize ourselves for self-defense. That's what I've been arguing on this show for the last 2 weeks. It's self-defense time. And we've got to defend ourselves. What happened in Mocha should not happen in another African Guyanese community. It should not happen in any community, whether it's Amerindian or East Indian. It should not happen in any community. The fact of the matter is that it has been happening in our community, the African Guyanese community. And so we've got to prepare ourselves for self-defense. We've argued on this program that this is not about squatting. It's not about squatting. Squatting is as old as the ages. This is not about squatting. They've been arguing that it's about eminent domain. This is not about eminent domain. It's about the government using squatting and eminent domain as excuses to attack people, to take away people's land. That's what this issue is about. It may have started as squatting and eminent domain, but the objective is not to move against squatters. If that was the objective, then those people at Mocha would have been treated differently. Because there's squatters in other communities whose homes have not been razed, whose homes have not been destroyed, whose bodies have not been battered. So it's not about squatting. Eminent domain, the government right to take private property for public use. What is the public use? What is the public use? And why only particular communities? There's the government right to take private property for public use ends, and where does people's right to own their property and to determine their livelihood begins? Those are the issues we're going to be talking about tonight. Rickford Burke is in the house. We expect Harris to join us. Share the link. Welcome to Politics 101, where we learn, we teach, we analyze, we mobilize. I said in the last program, that I think our members of parliament ought to become very active. They should become active parliamentarians. And I shared that I invited a few parliamentarians to come to talk about NOCA. None of them has come on yet, except the parliamentarian for East Bank, Nima Flubes. And I argue that she is my example of what a parliamentarian should be doing. Some parliamentarians called me over the weekend to say that I made a blanket statement, and no, it was not a blanket statement. I said I invited some parliamentarians, and they did not come on. I should not, whether it's Mark, Rickford, Burke, Sherrod, whoever, Kidaki, we should not be inviting parliamentarians. In this hard guava season when people take in blows, parliamentarians should be running us down, asking us to come on to these programs. It should be part of their job to come on to these programs to help to educate our people. That's my argument. Though I'm not anti-parliamentarians. I know the difficulty of being a parliamentarian in these times, and I'm in solidarity with our parliamentarians. I'm in solidarity with them. But I'm saying they've got to change their game. I forgot one parliamentarian when I was talking, that's Sherrod Duncan. I wasn't even thinking about Sherrod as a parliamentarian. I mean, Sherrod goes way above what parliamentarians should be doing. He's an activist. And so I wasn't even thinking about him. So Sherrod, my apologies. My apologies. It occurred to me over the weekend as I was reminiscing and reflecting that Sherrod Duncan is a parliamentarian. So there we go. Yesterday was budget day, almost $800 billion, 40% increase from last year. And I've been looking to see whether the various groups in society get a 40-something% raise. And from what I've been seeing and hearing, I spent some time. I listened to the budget presentation for the first time in a long time. I don't pay attention to that thing because I think it's just boring. I think the budget should be distributed to parliamentarians. They study it and they come to parliament to debate it. Nobody should be standing in front of parliamentarians for 4 or 5 hours reading foolishness, because that's what it comes down to. If you're poor people, it's foolishness because there's not much there. Brother G.H.K. Lal, I was reading a column by him, and he estimates that in terms of disposable income for poor people, that is things like old age pension and those things, money going into your pocket, extra money that's going into your pocket, it represents only 1.7% raise for poor people, 1.7%. And the budget is 41% above last year. So already, in a preliminary way, we are seeing the bias of this government in terms of spending is not for poor people. It's not for working people. $789 billion. $789 billion. How it's being distributed? Over the coming days, we're going to bring the numbers people, the economists, for them to go through it. I smell something. I smell something more than fishy in that budget, and you should smell it too. Anyhow, let's go tonight. Continue to talk about government aggression, pointing the spotlight again and again on Moko. Good evening, Brother Rickford.
Good evening, Doctor. Good night. How are you? Good night to your listeners.
I'm doing fine as far as readying myself for the fight. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. May you have a productive one.
And that's only traditional because a lot of our viewers will tell us there's nothing to be happy about as we begin the year. Because we began the year with those images, as if we were on the West Bank in the Palestine, as if we were back in South Africa apartheid era. As you looked at those images, Mr. Burke, what went through and what is going through your mind?
Good night, Dr. Hines. Good night to you and your listeners. Those images tortured me. I think that's the appropriate word to use, torture. I'm not only traumatized, I'm tortured by them. It conjured up in my mind what slaves went through on those plantations. That's what came to me. And Dr. Hines, if I am to tell you that I'm angry, it's an understatement. I'm exceptionally angry. When a government can send police officers to drag Black women through a mud, throw them in a police vehicle and arrest them because they're protecting their home. The most prized possession of a woman, of a human being, of a child is their home. And the government deprived a number of families of not only their lives, their livelihoods, their home, killed their cattle, buried it, some buried alive, broke up furnishings and appliances. It was brutal, and you said the right thing. It was like Palestinians being attacked on the West Bank, or Blacks in South Africa being brutalized. And I maintain, Dr. Hines, somebody must be held accountable for this. We've had Linden. Nobody has been held accountable. We had the Henry boys. Nobody has been held accountable. We have Quindon Bacchus shootings. Well, people have been charged there, but the police officers that shot into crowds, not accountable, no inquiry, no investigation. Same thing happened with Boston in Essequibo. Same thing happened now again. Matter of fact, Kevin Andrews at Grove, no inquiry, no accountability. And now we have Mucka. And I heard you say, Dr. Hinds, that it started out with squatting and eminent domain. I am not even sure if those people were squatting. The attorneys are not sure if those people were squatting. I have done significant research on this issue. The NDC is saying that these lands are ancestral lands. Lands and Surveys and the Ministry of Housing is saying these lands are government reserves. So what is it? And I'm perplexed. It's inexplicable to me that these residents did not go to court to try to get an injunction for the courts to decide on this matter. And I want to make it clear, I've spoken to some of these victims, the Mucka victims. It is not true that they did not want to move. They wanted just compensation to move. And the government was not willing to negotiate with them. Some people took it, and the government is boasting. Yeah, some people took it. Without any legal representation, they took it. Maybe that's good for their families. But the government can't dictate to families what the values of their properties are and whether or not they must sell cattle. It's inhumane. It's a crime against humanity. The government violated international law. And I know that some people are preparing a petition to file before the Inter-American Human Rights Commission. I hope that that commission will be filed very quickly. But somebody must be held accountable. And I'm disappointed in the opposition that they have not kept this on the front burner. They have not called for an inquiry. They have not held police officers to account. They should have gotten photographs and names of those police officers that brutalize people and publish them, let the public see who they are. We have to change strategy in Guyana. We cannot allow our people, African Guyanese, East Indians, Amerindians, including the mayor, who this government continues to brutalize, to get away with it. We have to change strategy. You come into Georgetown, you arrest the mayor for nothing. You know they instruct that his security be taken away. You're going to Mucka, you beat women, break down their homes, tore up everything, destroy their appliances. The intent was to destroy their lives. That was the government's intent. And then the president boasted that he wanted to be tough. Well, the people of Mucka should have showed the government that they can be tough as well. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm disappointed in the opposition. They're the political representatives of these people. They should have had a multi-pronged strategy of going to the courts, resisting this brutality. And I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed. People need a safety net. People need to be defended. People need political representation. Dr. Hinds, I'm a supporter of the opposition. I don't support the government, but I think the opposition is failing its supporters when we have such weak representation. Yes, Nima Flubes is a giant of a woman. She stood her ground. She's been out there representing her people. Amanza Walton Desir was on the ground. The opposition leader was on the ground. Shara Duncan was on the ground. Roysdale Ford was on the ground. But that's not enough. That's not enough. By now, we should have had an impact assessment of the damages, how much hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever. We should know, the public should have a report. How many families are affected? How many women, how many children are out of school? Where these families are, the economic costs, all of that, we don't know. The opposition is failing its supporters, and they fail the people of Mucka. And the people of Mucka need proper representation, whether it's in the courts, whether it's in the parliament, whether it's in the NDC, whether it's at the region. And we must demand that.
Thank you very much, Rickford Burke. And I want to share your sentiment as far as the opposition is concerned. As viewers know, I am quite conservative when it comes to my assessment of the opposition. I sometimes am near to the action as one of the leading members of the WPA. I am near to the situation sometimes, and I appreciate the difficulties when you come up against league government like this. And so I I don't cite it unnecessary. But I think in this instance, I expected, like Rickford said, I expected more. We cannot treat these incidents statistically and move on as yet another instance, a little bit of noise, and we move on. We have to represent our people. Our people cannot represent themselves because they don't have the necessary tools to represent themselves against a government that is beastly and that is ready to use force. A government that goes in there and lick down people's homes, send the police to kneel on a woman. That is a government that is prepared to use extreme violence. And in that
war.
kind of situation,
that was a war, doctor. That was a war.
Yeah, it's a declaration of war. And we can expect our people on their own to defend themselves. They need their political leaders. This is the time. And I think at the very least, if the president said, I'm acting like this because I don't want to be weak, he's signaling to his supporters, when I'm fighting them, I'm not going to be weak. What are we on our side signaling to our supporters that they're weak? The other side is signaling to its supporters, I'm weak because I don't want you all to look at me and say I'm a weak leader. Should we look at our leaders and call them weak? Because they've not even sneezed. They've not sneezed. They've not even put a couple of thousand people on the streets as a symbolic gesture to say, we are putting these people on the street to show that we also are not weak. That's a significant statement by the president. And so in this instance, I disagree with the opposition. So I concur, Brother Rickford. Rickford, explain to our audience this concept of eminent domain. Because point about compensation, just compensation. Go ahead.
Well, in simple layman's term, eminent domain is a doctrine that allows the government to usurp private property for public good. And so if they want to build a stadium, if they want to build a soccer field, and the land is there, and the land must be utilized for a particular purpose, then the law allows the government to take that land and compensate you for it. But there must be just compensation. In this case, they claim they want to build a road. What is also inexplicable is the government, the engineers are saying that these lands were not in the path of this road, this new road. And the people of Mecca have not been, to this day, informed why it's absolutely necessary for the government to tear down their homes and claim that it's obstructing development when it's not. Some people are reminding me that there are some other MPs here. I don't want to not recognize people: Coretta McDonald, Natasha Singh, Sherrod Duncan, and others. But there's a particular dehumanizing factor here. The government wanted to strip these people of their human dignity. They wanted to strip them of their livelihood. And the government wanted to show power, dominance, East Indian dominance over Black people. That's how I see it. And in Guyana, that's what the politics is. And that's how this government governs. So we can't escape from the race factor. And I think one of the messages that the opposition needs to send, not only in the Mecca situation, but with all of these new land acquisitions, and this government taking up land and signing new deals, is exactly what Barry Jagdale did as opposition leader. Say to the international community that any new government that the opposition is part of will not recognize these these agreements and these actions. For instance, if it turns out that the Mocha lands are ancestral lands, the PNC should make it very clear that we will take back those lands and give it back to the people. I think we are at the crossroad. We're at a fork in a road here in Guyana. It is very clear that the People's Progressive Party government wants to develop Guyana, but they want to develop only for their supporters. They don't care about the people from the opposition, be it Amerindians or East Indians or Blacks. They're mostly targeting Blacks. And they have a war against the Black population. As you said, that was a declaration of war. And if the government is declaring war on part of the population, then the population would be justified to respond. And you respond by different strategies, bringing in the international community. One of the things that is notable to me is that the international community is saying, oh, we want stability. And I think to some extent that might be influencing the opposition strategy. But we can't allow the international community, for instance, the American embassy and the British embassy and the UN, Canadians, or whatever it is, to tell the opposition, and I'm not saying that I have any specific knowledge of this, but if it is true, as we're hearing, that the international, these ABC ambassadors and other members of the international community are telling the opposition that they should not protest, then why isn't the international community, those same representatives, going to the government and saying, you have to govern equitably? You can't mistreat people. You have to respect human rights. You have to respect people's human dignity. Why are they doing that? Why is the opposition listening to these people when they themselves are acting like imperialists and encouraging the government, because silence is complicity, encouraging the government to treat Black people in Guyana like we're Palestinians or we're Blacks in South Africa under an apartheid government? Something has to change. There must be accountability. And as for the Guyana Police Force, I heard that they called me the enemy in the Guyana Police Force among the leadership. That's fine. I want to be the enemy of people who abuse people's rights. I want to be the enemy of police officers that frame people and dirty cops, because I believe in a rule of law. And there must be accountability for those police officers who stood in public. They're captured on videos, breaking homes and breaking bridges. That's not the role of the police officers. And those police officers who engaged in that type of atrocity should be punished. But they feel that this government has their back because they're doing the dirty work of the government through the police commissioner. And the government has countenanced what they're doing. But there must be accountability. I've been briefing elected officials over here. I've sent them videos, and they're asking me what the people in Guyana are doing. There must be accountability, and the people of Guyana have to shed this fear, this intimidation, the fear they have that the PPP will kill them or send police to brutalize them, and stand up for their rights and their human dignity.
Rickford, political activist and political commentator, weighing in on what occurred at Mocha. And he is making the point that we have treated this matter too lightly. And by we, I mean the political leadership. This matter is pregnant with a whole bunch of sensitive issues. Let me tell you all, in 1897, after a decade of famine throughout the English-speaking Caribbean, people were dying, Barbados, Guyana, dying Black people of hunger, dying more people died in the first 50 years after emancipation than died in the last 50 years of slavery. You all hear that? You all hear that? And so the British sent to the English-speaking Caribbean, and that commission presented a report to the British Parliament in 1897. And it said that the people of the Caribbean need land, that they were put out of slavery, but they weren't given the tools of emancipation. And in an agrarian economy, land is important. And they recommended that land be given to the people. It was around the same time that the 40 acres and a mule also was projected in the United States. So the question of land is very sensitive. Of course, the British Parliament did not act on that recommendation of its own commission of inquiry. But the fact of the matter that the record is there, that the British admitted that emancipation would mean little without land. In Guyana, Africans had bought land. But those lands were slowly being taken away from them. The question of land remains the single most important issue. As we talk about reparations, we have to talk about reparations from the British. But we also have to talk about reparations from our own government. Our own government. Because our own government, after independence, did not settle the question of land for Black people. Amerindians got land at independence. East Indians got land in front of the estates. African people whose lands were taken away, the post-independence governments have not settled that question. And so internal reparations, as far as land is concerned, is urgent in Guyana. And our government cannot now say that it cannot afford reparations. As the old people would say, in Guyana, look, we got plenty land in our country. We are not short of land in Guyana. Give land to the landless. Don't take away land from the landless. In 2022, we should be giving to the landless and giving more land to those with land. But instead, the government is taking away land from people. As my brother Rickford says, eminent domain says that the land must be used for public purpose. Are you taking away my land to give it away to people? That's not public purpose. Are you taking away my land to set up gambling casinos? That's not a worthy public purpose. Are you taking away my land to give it to people to set up all kinds of big buildings to make profit? That's not a public purpose in the context. And let me explain. If the real estate of that piece of land goes up, then the occupiers of the land should have the first shot at real estate. Value the land. And if the land comes up to $200 million, let those people sell it to your friends for $200 million. Let them get the $200 million. You don't take it away from them and give it to your friends who will own that land for $200, $300 million. If you want to stop and develop, good. But value the land while the people are on there and let the people benefit from that value. Let those 20-odd families who are there, let them benefit from the value of the land if it's 200 and 300 million. And if they choose to sell it to whoever, they should sell it and get the $300 million. That's my position. And so I think our leaders are taking this matter lightly. Land is capital, potential capital, and real capital. Land. Guyana is on the cusp of being developed. I'm not against development. I'm developing the blood of my people. I'm not against stability, but I'm against stability at the expense of the dignity and the human rights of people. That is the issue. And I think as opposition leaders, that's where our argument should go. I'm in favor of going to court. As Rickford said, you know, we got to go to the court. Even if the court turns us back often, we still got to keep going. But the court should not be the only arena of struggle. We have to struggle where people are. And I want to say to Guyanese of all races, but especially Guyanese of African descent, never forget what happened at Moko. East Indian Guyanese like to say, never forget Wisma, what they call the Wisma massacre. Although both sides in Wisma have their narratives of suffering, because African Guyanese suffered as a result of Son Chapman. The Jews never forget the Holocaust. African Guyanese should never forget Moko. And Moko is not the Holocaust, but Moko is part of the continued Holocaust against Africans that began on the shores of Africa right through the Middle Passage. 400 years, 300 years. Moko is part of a larger Holocaust. And this government is insensitive, racially insensitive, hard ears, and if you don't hear, old people say, you must feel. And we got to begin to make this government feel. I don't care whether they interpret what I am saying as violence. I know what is violence. Violence is what you saw at Moko. And that is not what I'm advocating. I'm not sending Black people to lick down people's homes, and stoop down and put your knees on a woman's back. I'm not sending you to do that. It's violence. I'm talking about protection against violence. Rickford, Burke, your thoughts on my comments?
Indeed, and I want to go straight back to what Moko was. Like I said, Moko is the closest representation, contemporary representation of slavery, what slaves went through. We saw clearly what our foreparents went through. And the fact that slaves bought that village, that the government is now brutalizing their ancestors for, their descendants for, I think it's, I don't even want to use the words, but let's say it's a war against the people of African descent. And what I want to see, Dr. Hinds, is just like Amerindians have a right to their land, we need an African ancestry land policy where the government cannot touch African ancestral lands. That must be enshrined in law now. We now see that it is something that Black leaders in Guyana must advocate for. We want to see a law protecting Black ancestral lands, and that the government must ask permission to go on these lands. Look at the estates of Indians and Portuguese, like the Vera's estate and the Versailles estate. These lands are titled lands. African Guyanese have always been disenfranchised, have always been exploited, always taken advantage of by both governments. I remember a minister saying when I was a teenager that certain communities mustn't get land title because you lost their political support. They become independent, and it was reprehensible to me that a government official would say that. But both sides, but particularly PPP, want to manipulate Black people's lands. They now realize that African ancestral lands are prime property. That's why Anil Nanlal told the people in Berbice to go break down the fence and take over the land of Kojo McPherson's descendants. We must pass a law. Well, we probably wouldn't be able to get a constitutional amendment, but there must now be a law protecting Black ancestral lands. And let me also say this. We don't know, sorry, we know. These people are still homeless. They have nowhere to go. Their kids are not in school. They own no possessions, nothing. They're in a state of uncertainty. Nothing has happened for them. The government has not gone in to say, let us negotiate. People are donating stuff to them. They can't live like this. There needs to be a resolution of this issue. And the international community must play a role, even if they have to be the mediators. Our ambassadors, the Canadians, sorry, ABC ambassadors, our ambassador, the US ambassador, cannot sit on the sideline when there are crimes against humanity. In Russia, they're bombarding people. Those are crimes against humanity. As a matter of fact, I'm hearing now in this country, members of Congress are calling for Russia to be declared a terrorist state. Our ambassador is silent on crimes against humanity, against women and children in Guyana. Why? Why is the United States ambassador silent about this mucker carnage? Why is the Canadian ambassador silent? Why is the UN ambassador silent? Why is the British ambassador silent? Are they going to begin to become vocal when people start to retaliate against the government and retaliate against the police? Is that what they want the society to turn to? Are they supposed to be the mediators, honest interlocutors, to say, hey, let me bring the sides together for a resolution? No, they have, from the time this government came to power, allowed this government to brutalize opposition supporters, disenfranchise opposition supporters, brutalize Black people. And they're silent. They're silent. But if today the African Guyanese population decides to take to the streets or something, you will hear all of these diplomats talking about stability and peace and tranquility. But they're silent, just like the world was silent in the face of oppression of the South African people. Just like the world was silent to apartheid. You had United States government officials going and supporting apartheid government. And we're seeing it in Guyana again. We have this ambassador in Guyana supporting a racist regime. And we have to start holding our government here accountable as well. Because they're going after Myanmar, they're going after Iran, they're going after Cuba, they're going after Russia, North Korea. And we have a despotic regime right here in the Western Hemisphere that they're embracing because of what? Energy security? No, we have to also hold the United States government accountable, and we want to see action in Guyana. We will agitate to make sure that there's some change in US policy towards Guyana this year. I guarantee the people in the Guyanese and the diaspora at home, we will work hard to make sure there's some change in US policy towards Guyana in this year, 2023.
The change in US policy towards Guyana, of course, we know the US have made some statements against the government. The previous US government called the 2020 election rigged elections or attempt to rig the elections. They did something unprecedented. They sanctioned one side before the results were announced. And so therefore influenced the outcome of the election by sanctioning one side before the election results were announced. Usually what you do is wait until the elections results are announced, and then you said this side is wrong, this side violates, and so you sanction them. But these sanctions were given when the elections were still to be called. That was unprecedented. The new government in America comes in, and it changed the designation from a rigged election to a disputed election. And that is significant. But I agree with Brother Rickford. the American government has to do more. The American government, like all the other governments, have to pay attention, but we have to be louder. We have to be louder in our screams. We have to be louder in our condemnation. We have to be louder in our physical presence in the open space. We cannot cry in silence. No more. We cannot cry in silence. We have to cry in the public space. And we have to turn our cries into action. Self-defense. I will not tell Black people, opposition supporters, go and do to the supporters of the PPP what the PPP is doing to the supporters of the opposition. I will never do that. I will never do that. The ordinary Indian woman, the ordinary Indian man, the ordinary Indian child is not culpable. The ordinary Indian woman is not the one declaring war on Black people. But the Indian government is using the votes of Indian people to declare war on Black people. And insofar as our Indian brothers and sisters remaining quiet, then history will not be kind to them. History will not be kind to them. But, as I said, I will never tell Black people to go attack ordinary Indian people. Our eyes must be kept on the perpetrators of violence, the perpetrators of domination, and that's the PPP government, including those Black men and women who sit there in a government that is beating up on your people. You walk the streets as if you are patriots. Those people, those Blacks in the PPP, I don't care whether you bring the PPP out of conscience or you hang your mouth where it's so dry. That's your personal business. That's your political business. But when that government is beating up on your brothers and your sisters, and you remain quiet or you justify it, it's time for us in the Black community to say, you do not belong to us. Persona non grata. I have been slow because my experience in politics said, allow the fool to hang himself. And I know that this PPP would hang itself, but I am not prepared for it to go further. I've seen enough. We have seen enough.
Exactly.
We have seen enough. Rickford, Burke, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here, my brother?
You know, the last time I said this, a lot of people criticized me, but I'm saying it again. I have come to the conclusion, and a lot of people too, but they don't want to say it. If the PPP government, if the PPP leadership does not want to coexist in a society with Afro-Guyanese, they must take their supporters and go live on an island somewhere. They are working hard to divide the country. They have already divided the country. As far as I'm concerned, they don't want to live in a country with Black people. And if they don't want to live in a country with Black people, they must go somewhere else. Go to Indonesia, go to Bangladesh, go to India, whatever they want to do, or go on an island off the Atlantic. I don't know. But so long as we have one country, the PPP has to understand that they have to coexist. We have to cohabitate the land of Guyana together. And they are not more superior to African Guyanese or Amerindians or other East Indians that don't support the PPP. And so if we are to coexist, and if we believe that the natural patrimony is It belongs to Guyanese, all of us. If we believe that, if the PPP believes that the development of the country is for everybody, then the PPP has to change. Something has to change radically. Or else Guyana is going to end up like Sudan. We're going to have two countries. Because I am not sure that this generation and the other generations coming are prepared to live in slavery. The PPP is the new plantocracy. The PPP operates like if Guyana is a PPP plantation, like Guyana belongs to the PPP and all of us live on their land. And not only me saying that, Starbuck News just did an editorial that says that. The Starbuck News editorial 3 weeks ago said the PPP is behaving as though Guyanese live on their land. And so that's why it's important for the international community to step in. I was talking to a government official on the coalition side, and I said, you guys have to invite the international community to step in at this point in time, because we are heading towards a civil war. There's no question about it. It's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. We are heading into civil unrest. Which other black village is going to tolerate what the PPP did to Maka? Which other village? Belladrum, Golden Grove, Buxton, then Amstel, Sisters, Bagoston, where? Which other black village is going to tolerate that? And I think the weak response from the opposition is what is giving this government the spunk that they are demonstrating to mistreat opposition supporters, because they're saying, whatever, man, they're gonna make some nice for 2 days and them that done just bulldoze them and go through. Somebody has to stand up to this government. Somebody has to stand up to this government. And it is not, they say we are encouraging an insurrection or whatever. Nonsense. Nonsense. What are we supposed to do? Sit back and allow this government to abuse our people? Are we supposed to stay silent because Barjagder and Orphanali think that they're superior to black people? They're not. They're not. And we are not going to allow them to abuse people. And something drastic is going to happen in the country. And I want to address members of the Guyana Police Force. These young police officers that the government is using to abuse them. You notice there's a shift in strategy. The government before on the Barjag, they used death squads and phantom squads to do the kind of work that the Guyana Police Force is doing, which is brutalize people to make them compliant with the PPP regime's desires. Now they're using the Guyana Police Force. Hicken is like the new leader of the squad, where he executes whatever the government tells him to do. And he has been brutalizing the black population. And so we have to tell young police officers not to allow themselves to be used by races who don't consider them as equals. Because the people that were abused in Maka are these young police officers' aunts and mothers and sisters and cousins that they're brutalizing. That police officer that knelt in Chanel's back, and the other police officer dragged her off through the mud. That could have been their mothers, their aunts, their sisters. And I want to appeal to members of the Guyana Police Force. Would you want another police officer to do that to your mother and your aunt and your grandmother and your sister and your cousin? Is that what you want for your family? Think about it. And is the government paying you enough to do their dirty political work? Do you want the government to take police officers in Essequibo and go and break your grandmother's house down and her bridge down? No. So there must be reason. Yes, I understand police officers have to follow orders. It's a paralegal organization. But they must ask questions and they must comply with the law. There's standards of operation for police officers. You can't brutalize people, violate their rights, their human rights, their human dignity. You could be held accountable on the international law. And we in Guyana have to start utilizing these laws because they're protocols and conventions and international agreements that this government signed and must adhere to. And the Mucka situation demonstrated that this government does not believe in human rights, in human dignity, in complying with the law. They believe in brute force and ignorance when it comes to dealing with Black people. Look how they dealt with Pigeon Island. Look how they dealt with other East Indian communities. They went and gave these people, begged them to take transport, regularize their squatting lands. But when it comes to Black people, they treat us as subhumans. And it has to stop. And you spoke about the Blacks in the government. It is disgraceful that Mark Phillips, and I see him calling me out on his page regularly saying I'm not speaking out about certain things. Why isn't he speaking out about Mucka? Why hasn't he, as a Black man, gone into Mucka and meet with those children who are homeless and ask them if they had a meal, ask them how they're going to school? Why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't the Minister of Foreign Affairs do that? And McCoy and Edgell and Hamilton, why don't they do that? They claim that the Black population is their constituency. Why aren't they in Mucka? Why the Prime Minister running up to Linden to give somebody, deal with Mucka? You have, what? They said 14 families homeless, sorry, 7 families homeless, 14 adults, 20 children. Where's the compassion of the government? Where's the caring government? Where's this one Guyana? Why don't the Black ministers go and talk to the people in Mucka and explain to them why they send these HIMARS and excavators and police officers to destroy their lives? They must do that. They claim to be the constituents, the representatives.
Rickford, Burke, calling them out. Good evening to all of you who are joining us. You've come out in your numbers tonight. Thank you very much. My brother Oswin, the answer to your question is yes. Brother Oswin posted to me, the answer is yes. Thank you all, those of you who have remained loyal to us and loyal to these programs, because it's not just this program. It's all the other programs that are witnessing for our people, standing up for our people. I notice there is the dangerous distinction between who lives at home and who doesn't live at home. I noticed the opposition leader got into that kind of thing. That's dangerous talk. You know, you are a Guyanese, you work for your country, you stand up for your country. That is what is important, not where you live is important. I just got back from Guyana. After spending weeks there, I spend 4 to 5 months per year in Guyana. It doesn't matter where I live, and it doesn't matter where I am. It's what I do for my country. What I do for my country. And I think Brother Aubrey went off course there when he's following the PPP's nonsense about who live where and who should not be saying where. I don't think that was wise on the part of the opposition leader. You know, when you want money to campaign, you come to North America. You go to England, you go to Barbados. And then you're saying that people who live outside are calling for this. Come on, come on, come on. It's not where you live. It's your contribution that is most important. I'm disgusted by that kind of conversation about 2 types of Guyanese or two categories of Guyanese.
Well, Dr. Hines, I am not from Singapore. Yes. You're not from Pakistan. We're Guyanese, and it doesn't matter to me who thinks what. I'm Guyanese, and I'll continue to speak out for the rights of Guyanese. It's unfortunate the comment was unfair. I responded to it, and I'm done with that. I support the mission of the opposition. The opposition represents half of the population. I will never support the PPP. I can never support the PPP. They don't believe in human rights, and they believe in racism. And I am, when I look at the African Guyanese in the PPP, all of them have some political problem with the opposition. That's why they're there. They're not there because of conviction. Somebody's there because Burnham do something to the father, and somebody do something to this, and Hamilton vexed because of this, and they're not there because of conviction. And they remain there because of position, right? They're pampered and they receive all these privileges in society, and they have drivers and they get all this money. Some of them can take bribes and do whatever they want, and a kickback and a pull. I'm not saying they do, I say they could. It's not like some of them don't, but they have a privileged life. So they enjoy the privileges that come with the job. But are they happy? I would like to be a fly on the wall of the Prime Minister's house when he looks at these blatant acts of racism like we have at Mucka, and hear what his conversation is. He must have a conscience. But you know what? They can't say anything because Jack David is going to come down on them and treat them like infidels. So that's why they have to remain silent. But it's amazing to me that people have this mindset, coming back to the whole issue of who and the reason why there's a reason why people are advancing this argument. We in the diaspora are more strident. We come from a society that believe in democracy, and we want to see the same thing at home. We want to see activism. We want to see proper representation. We want to see resolute representation of the people, like we see here, and we see weakness in Guyana. And so, in defense of their defenseless position, they say, well, we home, we know what the strategy should be. We're looking at the vicissitudes and we know what the challenges are. No, what people want is zealous representation. Anywhere you go, anywhere in the world you go, there must be zealous political representation, or else people are going to run you over. And that's what's happening in Guyana on both sides. Whenever the government is attacked, they say, well, we live abroad, we should stay silent. Well, now the opposition has adopted that and say, you know, well, people who live abroad want them to take a different approach. Oh, we want zealous representation, effective representation, competent representation.
And it's not a diaspora thing. I said I spent weeks in Guyana recently, and people in Guyana on the ground share that view. They want much more forceful representation from their leaders. They can tell me, because I am not in parliament, I'm not in the formal leadership, and so I tend to hear more than the formal leadership. I tend to hear more critique of the formal leadership. And I can tell you, wherever I have gone, whether it's on the West Coast or the East Coast or Georgetown, where I spent most of the time that I was there, I didn't get to go out because to go further because it was holidays and so on. But people are calling for more forceful and forthright response. So it's not a diaspora thing. Maybe the diaspora people are given much more voice to what they hear when they go home. And so therefore, we ought not to fall for that thing of differentiating between who live at home and who can live at home and so on.
It is silly. It is silly.
Yeah. Brother Rickford, you know, what has Mucka gotten from this so-called development? A big road passing through. What has Mucka gotten? If you're saying you're developing, and this road is about development, you ought to show where the community would benefit. And as I said, if the community is at the front door of your development, then the community should benefit. But you made no effort to facilitate benefit from the community. In fact, Mucka is economically poorer. That woman whose merchandise was raised, she provided a service in that community. I visit Mucka relatively often because I have friends on that same road. And that, from achar to whatever product that lady sold, she was providing a service to our community. That service is no longer there. The community is poorer. Look at that man with those pigs, estimated over $9 million. of a black man, a young black man, providing a service not just to his community, but further afield, and being an example to other young black men in Moko and further. The lady who told us she left teaching job to get into business, and she watched them just demolished the dream. And then we turn around and say black people do business, they can't do business, they depend on stupidness. And when they build up their capital, they did on that piece of their own land. The government went in and bulldozed them. What about the people in front of the hospital? What about the people at Linden? You referenced them, Rickford. Examples of black people trying to do better against the odds. You know how much we are owed? At the time of emancipation, the British estimated 48 million pounds as compensation for the slave masters in the Caribbean. They managed to get the Rothschild, that Jewish company that still exists today, to give them 20 million pounds. The other 28 million, you know where it came from? The slaves, the ex-slaves, the ex-enslaved, had to work between 1834 and 1838 to pay that 28 million pounds. So the compensation to the slave masters, our foreparents, paid more than the British government. Guyana owes black people. And we got money now. I can go through history. I'm sure many of us did not know that piece of fact. That the Emancipation Act was not an act of emancipation. It was an act that sent our people into freedom with economic burden, not just not being paid for 200 and odd years, but in those 4 years of apprenticeship, they had to pay. That labor was to pay their slave masters. 28 million pounds, go, you all go and research it. You see, that's why they don't like us. Because what we do, we bring facts to our people. Guyana, not just the British, Guyana owes black people. It owes all of its people, not just black people. It owes the Amerindians, it owes the East Indians, but it has made an effort, small, to give Amerindians redress. We treat Amerindian lands as we should, with respect. East Indians got land, but black people, we have not been given redress. Whatever little we have to pay for it. Black Stallion just gone to the great beyond. He said, black man don't get nothing easy. So when the black man get a little something, he got to watch it with an eagle eye, because black man don't get nothing easy. And we black people play around sometimes. Moko is historic. As you said, Rickford Burke, Moko is the cumulative. It is the gathering of 300 years and more of suffering. It's the representation of it. It's cumulative. cumulative. And we are taking Moko easy. And that's my problem with all the opposition. I think if you frame something a certain way, then your response is a certain way. If you frame Moko as historic as it was, if you frame Moko as part of a larger policy of domination, if you frame Moko as part of a larger policy of stifling Black people, then your response would be different. If you frame it as the government going and moving squatters, then your response will be just the response we have. Because the PPP saying, well, the coalition, they remove squatters. I have never seen a Black government, not the Burnham government, not the Hoyt government, not the coalition government, going to an Indian community and demolish it like that. They remove squatters in Black community. That's true. But they were never racially sensitive to going to Indian areas. And if they did that, Indian people would not take it. Indian people would not sit down and take it. The Indian leadership in government now would not sit down and take it. Why are we treating it like a little matter? It is not a little matter. It's a big matter. It's a particular area, but it is the occasion. Moko and Amelia's ward and in front of the hospital are the occasion for the government to roll out its policy of war against the darkest of its citizens. Rickford, Burke, closing thoughts.
Well, to answer your question, what has Moko gotten from this? Nothing. And Moko will not get anything. Have you ever seen the government develop a Black town or Black village? No. They've just destroyed it. They've destroyed Buxton. They've destroyed every Black village that has stood up to them. And in terms of, you mentioned Afro-Guyanese, how we have been treated throughout history. You know, yesterday was Martin Luther King's birthday, and I listened to an interview, the last interview he did from Ebenezer Baptist Church. And he made a very important point. He said, throughout history, Blacks have been treated unfairly. And then he particularly said, at the emancipation, Blacks got nothing. We didn't get any land. We didn't get anything. And then they have the audacity to tell us, pull ourselves up with our bootstrings, but we have no boots. They didn't give us any boots, and they expect us to have a bootstring to pull ourselves up. And when he said that, and now with you saying the same thing, it demonstrates to us and to our young Afro-Guyanese citizens how important this struggle is. Do you think the government is going to develop Moko? Do you think the government is going to put any major industry in Moko? No. Black people live there. This government does not believe in empowering Black people. That's a fact. Regardless of what nonsense Irfan Ali or Bar Jack Day or Mark Phillips says, they say they do not believe in empowering Black people. And so Moko will have to fight for themselves. And the political representatives for Moko will have to fight for the people of Moko. And those people remain homeless today. Their lives have been destroyed. Their livelihood have been destroyed. You spoke about the pigs that were destroyed, killed, buried, sheep. The same thing. The government is telling them, well, sell your property. And I want to put something in perspective because I've spoken with these people. And the government is talking about, oh, they refuse to move. And these people are saying, we're not refusing to move, but we want to know, where are we going to live between where you give us to live, where you're placing us, and the structure we will build there? What will happen to me? I don't have a job. I'm a farmer. You're telling me go and farm on Hinds'Sight Living Highway when you're giving me a property at Hurstelling or farm to go and live arbitrarily, right? How am I going to get to Hinds'Sight Highway? I don't have a truck. How am I going to start a farm there? Have you identified the land? Is it fenced? Are you going to give me seedlings and so on to start my farm? How am I going to exist until this farm gets operational 4, 5, 6, 9 months down the road before I start to get produce from this farm? How am I going to live? Where am I going to live in between when you put me on this land and when I build a structure? How am I going to feed my kids? These are questions, legitimate questions. These people are asking, and the government is not concerned about that. They want those lands. And like I said, the opposition, Dr. Hinds, should make it clear that if the government changes, they're going to give back those people their lands, because the land belonged to their ancestors. The blood, sweat, and tears, excuse me, of slaves bought those lands, and it must be protected. And the government must do the same thing with other lands that this government is taking and other contracts they're signing. Just like Barry Jack, they said, the world should know, all these investors should know, an opposition government, if the parties in opposition come to the government, they will not honor those contracts and not honor those allocations of lands. Take them back. They should take them back. Just like the government is now taking away people's lands, let us run the country so. When the PNP come out of power, we take back everything they did. Or we shut down everything they did. When they come back in power, let me do that. Let us see if we can run the country and develop it like that. That's what I would do.
Rickford Burke there, as usual, saying it like it is, not holding back, speaking his mind. And we need that kind of leadership. All of us, Rickford, you know, we come from different perspectives, but we are fighting the same fight. And your emphasis is not going to be the same as my emphasis or Norton's emphasis or Benchop emphasis, but the point is that we are all facing the same target.
Yes, we want the same outcome.
Yes, is the despotic government of Guyana. My brother, it's always a pleasure talking to you. You know, a group of PPP activists wrote to the president of my university 2 years ago, complaining that I am a racist. And the reasons they give is that I am friendly with people who are racist. It was about the 4th or 5th letter they've written to my workplace.
And their term of racist is people who are standing up for the rights of others. That's racism. That's their racism. You stand up for the rights of Black people, you're racist. You must allow Black people to be brutalized by East Indian racists, and they must be called all sorts of names and discriminated against, and you must not give them any representation. You mustn't protect them because they're gods. These East Indian racists are the only human beings that God created, Dr. Hinds. They think they must dominate the world. Not on my watch.
Thank you very much, my brother. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
And to all our viewers, including our Indo-Guyanese viewers and supporters, love is the watchword. Struggle is constant. It's not a one-day thing. It's not a two-day thing. Moko must be a line in the sand for us because it has shown us that this government is not just an authoritarian government, it's crudely so. Crude. And we have to frame what we are going through in a certain way. That's where people like myself can help. It's poor people who have sent people like me to school to read the books and learn the theories. And we have got to give back in terms of taking that experience and putting it to the service of our people. We've got to continue to work. Today we fall down, but tonight we get up to face tomorrow. Times are hard. Times are rough, but we can't give up. Our leaders are not always there with us, but we must let them know in love. We must let them know not in hatred, but in brotherhood. Dr. King said, I'm criticizing America because I love America. America, you're arrogant, and God is going to break your backbone. The PPP government is arrogant, and God is going to break their backbone with our help, of course, because God helps those who help themselves. We come in peace as always, and we advocate for peace as always. But our peace is a fighting peace. Our peace is not a peace grounded in paradise. It's a peace that is grounded in a sense of ourselves as human beings, endowed with the faculties. And one of the faculties God has blessed human beings with is the will to fight back when you're under attack. Fight back when you're under attack. It's budget time. As I said, almost $800 billion they will be spending this year. We're going to spend the next couple of days figuring out how much of it for poor people, how much of it for Black people, how much of it for Amerindian people. We're going to figure that out. I smell something very, very ominous in that budget. Good night for all of us who are standing up for justice. Tomorrow night, we come back to continue to fight with all our might. The Lion of Judah shall break every chain and give us the victory again and again.